there's many layers to Bitcoin's game theory, and on the mining level, there's this, I think it's already started, this nations competing against each other for hash war, for hash on the network. You see that Bitcoin is already a global money. It's going to play an increasingly important role. I feel like we pulled forward like 10 years over the past, like the response to COVID and the Russian invasion has really sped things up on this game theory level. And so the idea is we'll have nations competing against one another. They'll see the United States getting 50% of the hash rate, and that will incentivize other countries to say, no, we're going to grab some of that so that we can, have a stake on the network. What do you all think about how this plays out? I'm sure you've thought about, as a business strategy, from a business strategy perspective, about the geopolitical sort of implications of hash and mining. Juri, you want to start on that one?
Yeah. So we're definitely seeing, and you can see that in the United States specifically, right, how different states are responding differently to Bitcoin mining. I do think that some of those incentives or openness to Bitcoin mining is coming for different reasons, and I think those reasons are also going to be developing over time. You have states like Texas that some of those values of liberty and freedom are, part of the country, and they're very welcoming to anyone starting any entrepreneurial activity as long as it's legal, and mining is absolutely legal. So I think other states also just see it as a tax revenue base, more jobs, many other things, and that's where they're starting by saying, we have energy, you need energy, you're going to pay us for that energy, come on board, right? I think maybe the reasons that are going to develop over time, and obviously one is what the narrative Bitcoin miners are trying to explain, how Bitcoin miners are also very very beneficial to the grid, and being integral part of the stabilizing the grid. I think more states have yet to realize that benefit, inviting miners, or in some cases maybe even subsidizing miners, or creating environment for miners where it makes sense for them to come, seeing that benefit. And I think the third phase would be what you alluded to, where states are recognizing the value of Bitcoin as an asset, Bitcoin as a decentralized asset, and realizing that they also want to be part of the network. They want to have hash rate in the state itself as a way of protecting Bitcoin, protecting citizens who hold Bitcoin, and so on. And I don't think many states are there yet on that level of thinking.
I guess this goes to like the point that we all love to say as Bitcoiners is like Bitcoin doesn't care, right? Like if you are a nation state mining Bitcoin, if you're an individual person in your backyard with a black box, right, from upstream data mining Bitcoin, Bitcoin doesn't care really. And we saw that happen with the Chinese ban, right? So it gives me a little bit of hope that regardless of if, nation state do try to adopt this as part of like their long-term strategy, which we've seen happening, right, in El Salvador too. That's great, but like overall, it shouldn't really affect how Bitcoin works, which is like ultimately the best game theory piece of Bitcoin is like it's still going to continue on. We're still going to use it how we want to, and it's still going to be for people in different areas that might need access to finance that like we are looking at it differently than them. So the beauty of Bitcoin is that you can use it however you want. And the beauty of mining Bitcoin is you can mine Bitcoin however you want, right? So whether it's like I said, an individual person or a nation state, I don't think it matters that much. Hot take there. I'm hungry, so.
I love it. Juri, we were talking about this a little bit before we went live about miner centralization, and a piece of that is centralization of the production of ASICs. And there are a few that are really producing them. Of course, it was dominated by Bitmain for so long. There's a few more producers now, TSMC, Samsung, etc. We've heard from Square, I guess Block, that they are going to start producing some ASICs. Blockstream recently bought an ASIC manufacturer. So we're starting to see some moves to decentralize the space, at least a little bit. Why is that important, Juri? And what do you see moving forward? Are we going to get even more chip manufacturers based in the United States? Do you see other parts of the world spinning up foundries?
Yeah, great question. And I would separate the stack or the process of making chips at the fab level, and then what we call manufacturers, which could entail anything from actually designing the chip that's being printed and then assembling the unit into the final product. And I do think that greater centralization is at a chip fabrication level. And that is not just the case for Bitcoin ASIC chips. I think that generally the world is very centralized in a couple of fabs that are making all kinds of semiconductor chips that we use in any electronics that we have, right? And I think first point there is that with COVID, with even with the war on Russia and Ukraine, I think that the world is realizing that maybe even for national security issues, there is need to bringing some of those functions, so to speak, in-house, right? And the United States has been taking some of those actions. So that's one point on the fab level, and in the Bitcoin mining space, the biggest fabs are TSMC and Samsung, like you said, and the Chinese SMIC is, I believe, the third largest. Then we get into the manufacturing decentralization, or the number of different manufacturers that we have, and this is where I would, you would put Bitmain and MicroBT and Canaan and Bitfury and many others in that camp, with Bitmain and MicroBT having the largest market share. And so if I look at that space, it's definitely still very centralized. And I think it's good for the industry to have new entrants come into the space. And with simple economics 101, more competition is in the end gonna reduce prices, improve processes, bring efficiencies, and ultimately it's better for the consumer, in this case for Bitcoin miner, and therefore better for Bitcoin mining industry and the ecosystem. So finally, I think the reason why we have not seen many entrants or disruptors to Bitmain and MicroBT historically is because it's very expensive and capital expensive business. And not to say that there aren't great chip manufacturers or designers around the world, right? It's just the pace at which new chips are coming online were at 18 or so months. And so if you were to get into this game, you would have to count, your first chip, you're still learning. Your first chip is not going to be the market leader. So you need to count that by your second or third try, which could take a couple of years, only then you will be competitive on the market and being able to collect some fruits of your labor. And in a very for startups, that's very expensive. For large companies like Intel and others, maybe the ecosystem was too small at a time and it was actually not meaningful for them. And I think we're now reaching the point where the pace of innovation or efficiency improvement is slowing down. And that means that the new chip from Bitmain or the new chip from MicroBT is going to be slowing down how much better it is as compared to the last generation. And what that's slowing down enables is for others to catch up. And I do expect that in the coming years, we're going to see, thankfully, a lot more manufacturers in this space.
So a few things there to react to. One, I think, you brought up a really interesting point about the national security issue for bringing chips in-house. And just going to a very high macro level, it's really interesting how the two things that are brought up with recent news is energy and chips, right? Which are the foundation to creating a good Bitcoin mining facility or company. So it's just, it goes back to the fundamentals of what you need to be prosperous, and energy and some types of chips are now in every single thing that we use. So I want to break down the ASIC manufacturing industry, because you bring up a good point, right? It's very centralized, starting to get less centralized. there's two main foundries that are currently producing chips at scale. There's TSMC and Samsung. TSMC works with Bitmain mainly, and Samsung works with MicroBT. So those are like the two largest ASIC manufacturers, right? They are based in different locations, which is generally good for us. So TSMC is obviously based in Taiwan. Samsung is based in Korea. From like a geopolitical perspective, that is something that I think of, just because if something was to happen in Taiwan, right, you also now can have machines or just chips specifically from Korea. Those two foundries, like Juri was saying, produce chips not just for Bitcoin mining, but for all of the things that we know, right? Your car, your cell phone, your computer, everything that you touch, your smart TV, your smart phone, right? Like everything is created there. And the thing that I found was really interesting is like each individual node, right, is like a large, basically like a large, like, I don't know, like manufacturing piece, right? Like, and there's only two companies in the world that make that, like, that device. So it's like super centralized, right? So it's not just like Juri was saying for Bitcoin miners and for the ASIC machines that like we all love and need. It's beyond that, right? Like the centralization of this space. So having, Intel in the mix, whether it's like, the best in class machine or one class less than the best in class machine, like I think it's net good for Bitcoin miners. Also, when we think about purchasing machines, which is like not something that is talked about beyond secondary market, the primary market is like not that clear. You sign a contract, right? You agree to a price. Sometimes that price changes based on like market conditions. You don't have a lot of insight into like what's happening or what's going on or what other people are paying for. So the increase of more ASIC manufacturers will, I think, make the industry a little bit more mature. We've come a little bit of a way, right, from like a few years ago with now you have contracts, right, that you are obligated to certain things. But I still think there's like a long way to go. So companies like Blockstream with buying Spondoolies and working on that, companies like Square getting into this, companies like Intel now backing, this industry itself is net good. Just because I think that it will increase like the professionalism of the space and allow for it to really turn into an industry that is like others with a little bit more transparency.